So what's up, guys? Welcome back to the Left Lane Podcast, where we talk all things MMA. Just had a great UFC card to wrap up. A bunch of big fights, big fight announcements that have been made recently, and overall just a lot of storylines coming out of this recent card, coming out of a few of the other cards recently, and just some other things that have just popped up in MMA. So we're gonna just start off by recapping UFC 291 once again. Um, just go over a few of the highlights and just recap an amazing card in Salt Lake City, Utah. Um, we had Miranda Maverick open up the card with an impressive submission, followed up by Uros Medic coming back with a third round TKO over Matthew Semmelsberger with a spinning elbow. Jake Matthews opened up the prelims and submitted Darius Flowers in the second. Roman Kopylov put a head kick on Claudio Ribeiro and put him out cold. Vinicius Salvador and CJ Vergara had a decent scrap. Gabriel Bonfim came back for his second fight and got it done in a minute and 13 seconds against Trevor Giles with a guillotine. Um, Kevin Holland opened up the main card by submitting Michael Chiesa in the first. Bobby Green subs Tony Ferguson with 6 seconds to go in the third. It was quite upsetting to watch. Um, we had Derek Lewis liven up Utah with a big flying knee over Marco Sergio de Lima, put him down in the first 5 seconds and just threw lunchboxes at him for the next 25. And then Alex Pereira showed a really impressive performance against Jan Blachowicz, stuffed a lot of the takedowns, stood up when he could, and beat Jan on the feet and won a split decision. So really impressive stuff from him. And then obviously Justin Gaethje wrapped up the show, closed the night with a massive head kick over Dustin Poirier, reminiscent of what Edwards did against Usman 11 months prior, obviously, with that fifth round head kick KO. But this one was a lot quicker and a lot more flawless of a performance from Justin Gaethje. He really looked great in the fight. Didn't show a lot of weaknesses. He got caught with a shot in the eye, which kind of messed with his vision for a little bit. But apart from that, it was pretty much all you could want. And Dustin Gaethje right now looks like one of the best fighters at lightweight on the feet. And there's a real debate to be made whether he is the best fighter on the feet at 155. I'd say it was Oliveira or Makhachev right now, but we'll see what happens. Because if he beats the winner of Oliveira Makhachev, then that's a really impressive performance or a really impressive win if he gets that, and that would show that he would be the best striker at lightweight. But let's talk about the month of July as a whole. I did my July recap video. I just put that out on my channel. Go give it a watch. I'll go through my categories and the winners that I gave out. I had Volkanovski with his performance against Yair Rodriguez winning the performance of the month category. I had Kevin Holland got the submission of the month by submitting Michael Chiesa in the first. I had Moreno versus Pantoja as the fight of the month, undoubtedly, and one of the fights of the year as well. The event of the month went to UFC 290. The KO of the month I gave to Justin Gaethje, pretty self-explanatory there. And then the moment of the month went to Robbie Lawler, who retired in one of the best fashions that I've ever seen, and a really enjoyable final fight to watch from ruthless Robbie Lawler. So that was my July recap video. You guys can let me know down below if you agree with those categories, but go give the whole video a watch because I talked about a lot more than just that. I gave out a bunch of nominations for each category, and I also recapped my picks for the month, and broke down some numbers of July, with the fights, with the finishes, and all of that. So go give that a watch on my channel. But let's just talk about Justin Gaethje and his improvement that he's shown in recent years. Just look at that first Dustin Poirier fight, and now look at this one. Or look at that first Dustin fight or the Alvarez fight, and then you can look at that fight with fiziev. Like, there's so many points recently in Justin Gaethje's career where you can look at him and then you flick back 5 years ago or 4 years ago and you just see a completely different guy. Because what you would see when you go back and watch Justin Gaethje in the first Dustin Poirier fight or the Eddie Alvarez fight or the Michael Johnson fight, even though he won, is just the guy that just throws in like a absolute wrecking machine and just tries to land with as much power as he possibly can. And don't get me wrong, that made for a bunch of entertaining fights and fight of the year, fight of the month, fight of the night candidates. But now he's really switched his focus to being a technical, better fighter that lands the right shots that will counter fighters. Not afraid to be on the back foot or the front foot, and he'll just throw what is right to throw. He won't just throw himself at you for the sake of just landing, because then he gets hurt and you get hurt. And his mentality back then was, "I'll hurt you and you hurt me, but you'll be more hurt." But now he's really switched up that mentality. He's suffered a few losses on the feet, like got dropped by Oliveira, lost to Poirier, lost to Alvarez, lost to Khabib on the ground, but more so in the striking, I think, is really where he switched his focus. Um, and really went from just being an absolute marauder car crash of a fighter to a technical, patient fighter who will just crack you because he's still got power for days. But now he's really showing that he can strike with anyone, and I'm really intrigued by a rematch with Charles Oliveira, and I'm intrigued by a fight with Islam Makhachev if he can keep that on the feet for more than 50% of that fight, because I think if he can stand up with Islam, that's going to look really interesting. Um, but moving on to another topic, let's talk about Alex Pereira and his impressive win against Jan Blachowicz. I hear a lot of people talking about how it wasn't that impressive, how he got fraud checked in the grappling, but like this is a guy who everyone was saying had no grappling going into this fight. This is a guy who was getting criticized for getting taken down and held down by Israel Adesanya in his like fourth or third MMA fight. It was his fourth MMA fight when he first fought Israel Adesanya for the belt. Um, but then since then, if you look at this fight, Jan Blachowicz is the guy who, for the last 2 rounds, took down Izzy, held him down, and Izzy had nothing and lost those 2 rounds because of it. And this is a guy now who survived the first round with a fresh Blachowicz on his back, fighting for rear naked chokes, fighting for bad positions for Pereira. And he fought out of them. He stood up, almost had a guillotine in the first round. And then second round, put the hands on him at the end of the second, and then edged him out in the third round, and got a really impressive decision win, in my opinion. He'll be fighting for the belt next against Yuri Prochazka. So let's just give that matchup a little bit of a preview. In my opinion, this is a lot easier of a matchup, or a lot more simple of a matchup, I should say, than a Jan Blachowicz. This matchup here, you're looking at pretty much one thing. You're looking at stand up, and I personally believe Alex Pereira is a better striker than Yuri Prochazka. He's a more technical striker. I believe he's got more punch for punch power. Yuri kind of throws himself into shots, which is what kind of causes the KO blows. But um, I truly do believe that Yuri Prochazka is not going to be at the level of Alex Pereira, and I do believe that Alex Pereira is going to beat Yuri Prochazka and become the light heavyweight champion and the ninth double champion in UFC history, the ninth two-weight champion in UFC history. Um, I just think he's going to counter. I think he's going to counter Prohaska. I don't think Yuri is defensively sound enough. He was getting cracked by pretty much everyone he's fought. He's getting rocked by Reyes. He's getting rocked by Glover, multiple times in both of those fights. And so I just think you look at Pereira, a world champion, glory kickboxer, former middleweight champion of the world, and I personally do believe that Alex Pereira, far better striker than a Yuri Prohaska. So I think he's going to win that fight. Not saying it's a guarantee. Yuri's got power for days and he's unorthodox as fuck. And you can't say Perez fought anyone like that. But I really am impressed by his stand up. I think obviously striking with Israel Adesanya, I think he's clearly one of the best technical strikers in the world. He does have a bit questionable defense at times. He was open to the left hook of Jan Blachowicz. But Yuri is a guy that just throws so many unorthodox shots and he loads up and winds up. And I think if you're loading up against Alex Pereira, you're going to get countered and you're going to get rocked with a big shot. Yuri's got a very good chin, hasn't shown to have some like unbreakable granite chin. Um, got rocked and almost put out by Glover in his last fight, who's obviously training Pereira. They're going to have setups for shots. They're going to know what they're doing there. Um, and then also the leg kicks as well. Pereira's got the best leg kicks in the sport, I believe. Maybe Alexander Volkanovski. Um, at least in the upper weight classes, I think Pereira's got the best kicks. And I think he's going to chew up Yuri's legs and piece him up on the feet, in my opinion. And if he does that and becomes a light heavyweight champion, this guy is the greatest or one of the greatest combat sports athletes. Not MMA athletes, but combat sports athletes of all time. Because if he wins this against Yuri Prochazka, look at his resume. You got Sean Strickland in your third fight, won the belt off Israel Adesanya, lost to him in the rematch, came back, went up a weight class, and beat Jan Blachowicz, a former champion. Mind you, Israel Adesanya also a champion. Um, so that would be three champions. If he beats Prohaska, who's also a former champion, if he beats Prohaska, that's three former champions on your resume. I believe that'll be his sixth or seventh fight, because what's that? He fought Andreas Michailidis, he fought Bruno Silva, Sean Strickland, Israel Adesanya, Israel Adesanya, Jan Blachowicz, Yuri Prohaska if he fights him next. So that'll be seven fights, and four of them will be against champions, three wins over champions if he beats Yuri Prohaska, plus Sean Strickland in there. He's a very solid fighter, top ranked middleweight. Um, and only the ninth fighter in UFC history to hold two different divisions titles. Obviously, it wouldn't be simultaneous, but still holding two different divisions titles. And also with his accolades in kickboxing, double weight champion. You got to start looking at Alex Pereira as one of the greatest combat sports athletes of all time. Um, but let's talk about Tony Ferguson. It's a tough talk to have. It's like sitting down and telling your kid that Santa's not fucking real. Like, this is a rough talk. It's something that it's difficult to approach, but it has to be said at a certain point. It's like if your kid's still believing in Santa at fucking 10 years old, or 12 or 13 years old, you just gotta let him know. You just gotta let him know. Just like with Tony Ferguson, when he's on a 6 fight win streak or 6 fight loss streak, I'm sorry, it's time. You got to just tell him, Tony, you got to really start thinking of this because you're taking a lot of damage. You've taken a lot of damage in your career, and this is only going to end badly. Um, but Tony Ferguson is not that guy. Tony Ferguson's the type of guy to just keep fucking going and go on a fucking 16 fight fucking loss streak in the PFL or some shit, and then still be talking about making a run at 48 years of age. Like, this guy, he's mentally not all there. That's clear. He's got CTE. He's got mental health issues. Um, but if he is going to keep fighting, let's just talk about a few potential options. Who can Tony Ferguson fight? Who do we want him to fight? I'm talking about like the Clay Guidas, the Michael Johnsons, the Joe Lozons, maybe a Jim Miller, even though I think he would lose that. Matt Brown, even though I think he would lose that. You got to give him a legend. Like, okay, there are plenty of guys. If you're looking at it, there are tons of guys that Tony can beat. You can make him fight featherweights. You can make him fight like bottom of the barrel lightweights. Like, fucking hell, give him Ricky Glenn. Ricky Glenn, who just got fucking KO'd and looked like a geriatric old man against Christos Ziagos, who's now fighting Drew Dober after he's going to get inevitably KO'd in that fight, even though Dober is, or Ricky Glenn's white, so Dober's probably not going to beat him. But, like, that's a guy you could do and just get him a win, but no one knows who Ricky Glenn is. Like, you got to give him someone who, like, there's still justifiable, like, this guy's fighting Tony Ferguson, get excited, not just like, we're finding the worst possible fighter just to get Tony a win. You got to give him someone who can still go into that fight and go, like, this is 50-50, please Tony win, instead of like, oh, Tony's going to win this, but it's not going to mean shit. Even though I still wouldn't mind that because I just want to see this guy get his hand raised. But Clay Guida, Joe Lozon, Jim Miller, Michael Johnson, these kind of guys, UFC 300, double retirement for both. Just the legends, let them go out properly, like Robbie Lawler did. So yeah, that's all my wish for Tony Ferguson is just pick the next fight. I don't want to see any fucking guy that has got like a KO in their last like 5 fights. I want to see no danger. Clay Guida, Michael Johnson, like these guys, just Joe Lozon, just guys who are just not good at all, who are also shit like Tony, just to get this guy a win because it's hurting my fucking mental health to watch this guy go on a 6 fight losing streak. But let's just talk about something else. What the fuck is the UFC doing with UFC 293? Sydney, Australia, have not announced an official main event. It's probably going to be Strickland versus Izzy. Haven't announced what would be a worthy co-main event or another main card fight. Let me read you this card so far, or I'll go the main fights off the top of my head. So, pretending we've got Izzy versus Strickland, that's the main event. Next, we've got Tai Tuivasa versus Alexander Volkov, um, as potentially like a feature fight, like a third fight on the card. You got Kai France versus Manel Cap. That could open up the main card. So you've got that, Tai, and Izzy. That's 3 main card worthy fights. Because in my opinion, I'll read you this main card like Carlos Ulberg versus Darwin Jung, not a main card fight. Car- so, um, Tyson Pedro versus Anton Tricali, not a main card worthy fight. Casey O'Neill versus Viviane Araujo, not a worthy fight on the main card. Jack Jenkins versus Chepe Mariscal, not worthy of the main card. Like these blood diamonds, he should be fucking in PFL or like fucking Eternal again or some shit. Like he's not good at fighting. Like they need to get something on here. Get Della on there against someone. So that's one, and then you still need another main card fight. So UFC, please do something because those tickets sold out instantly, and they haven't announced anything. So really weird. Get that done because sometimes it's September. I swear to God, it's actually September. Last year in September, you want to know what the card was? It was UFC 279. Ended up being Ferguson versus Diaz. It had Holland versus Hamzat co-main, and then Li Jingliang versus Daniel Rodriguez feature fight. The main card opener was Johnny Walker against Ion Cutelaba. So maybe you just get that, like, they just don't care about September. Maybe September is just their break month, and then they go full steam ahead with Abu Dhabi and then with MSG and then the December card, because that September card is shocking, and the September card last year was shocking as well. Um, so they really got to get something done for there. But let's talk about heavyweight division. I wanted to just mention this briefly. I only got two more topics to talk about before we move on to the questions. The UFC's heavyweight division. John Jones against Stipe Miocic is official for UFC 295, November 11th in MSG. Stipe, I think he's going to lose this fight. I don't think it's going to be competitive. I think it's going to end up being a fight where, like, we wasted 7 months of this. We could have done Pavlovich versus Jones and had a competitive fight, or at least something that looks competitive on paper. Like, if Jones goes in there and smokes Pavlovich, then we're going to be like, okay, fuck, geez, Jones is good. You can go retire now, Jones, because you've just proved all you needed to. Because coming back and beating Gane, who's shit with takedown defense, doesn't prove enough in my opinion. So you come back and starch fucking Sergey Pavlovich to run him over, and then you're good. You can retire. You have nothing left to prove. But beating Stipe is not a path to retirement, in my opinion, because Stipe is an old man who would probably lose to, like, number 7 ranked Sergey Spivak right now. Let's be real. Um, so Jones needs to, if he wins this fight, which he will, and then he retires, what's next? Let's say he wins and doesn't retire. I think you either just give it straight to Pavlovich, or you do Pavlovich versus Aspinall for a title shot. But I don't see them. I don't think what they're gonna do is. I don't see them doing Pavlovich versus Aspinall. One of them guys loses, so then they have to build back up for a title shot. And then if the winner of that fight just loses to Jones, that's another contender that is now tied to Jones' name. And you want a champion that is fresh, that's tied to Jones' name, because the UFC loves running narratives of what if this guy fought this guy would have won probably, even though maybe they wouldn't. So I say if Jones sticks around, you just do Pavlovich straight away. If he loses, so be it. If Pavlovich wins, then bam, you've got a new heavyweight champion who just beat the GOAT of the sport. Um, if not, if he retires, you do Pavlovich versus Aspinall for a vacant title. Or if Almeida does something really impressive against Blades, and then one of them, the other guys can't fight. You do Almeida, Aspinall, Pavlovich, two of them three for the vacant belt. Pavlovich preferably is one of them. Because if Almeida beats Blades, I think that's more impressive than Aspinall beating Kaibura. Which was pretty much just the comeback fight to just give him a free win after an injury layoff. So I think it's those three that are looking at it. If especially if Almeida beats Blades, and then winner of Gane versus Spivak can fight, like, the one of whichever one of those three doesn't get a title shot. I reckon that's what you do there. So let's say Gane beats Spivak, Almeida beats Blades, Pavlovich, and Aspinall both wait. Um, Whichever two you do, let's say you do Pavlovich versus Aspinall for the belt, you do Gane versus Almeida, winner gets a title shot against the winner of Pavlovich, Aspinall, and then you go from there, and the heavyweight division's sweet. So I think, but overall, I think it's going to be Aspinall, Pavlovich, and Almeida who are going to be those guys that just pass the belt around, and I think it's going to be a rotating circle of, like, Pavlovich beats Aspinall, Almeida beats Pavlovich, Aspinall beats Almeida, like a rock paper scissors fucking thing. Like, Pavlovich is the rock, Aspinall's the scissors, and fucking Almeida's the paper, like along those fucking lines. Um, but I think that's what's going to happen with heavyweight. But I am very excited. A lot of people say heavyweight's dead, but I'm really excited because I think those three plus Gane plus Spivak, Blades is always going to kind of be hanging around that top five. I think you've got some interest there, so I'm excited to see what happens with the heavyweight division. But let's just talk about last thing, UFC 292, the upcoming card. We'll preview it a little bit. Little bit underwhelming, I'll be completely honest. I'm excited for a few of the fights. Let's go through the main card. You got O'Malley versus Sterling main event. That has the potential to be absolutely amazing if O'Malley wins or if Aljo subs him in the first round. But if that just be boring, that could really sour the note of the card. You got Zhang Weili versus Amanda Lemos, which I know people are going to say, oh, women's title fight, who cares? But that could actually really end up being super exciting. Like, Zhang Weili puts on really good fights. She'll come to war and swing for as long as the fight lasts. And then Amanda Lemos, I mean, she's got the lesbian power. You already know, like she's gonna go in there and probably just swing and have a crack. She's got some power on the feet. She's got a half decent chin. So this fight could actually end up being entertaining. But then you got Ian Gary against Jeff Neal. This is actually something I'm really excited about, and I honestly think I'm more excited about this than the main event, just in terms of I guess the competitiveness of it. And I don't know what's gonna happen. Like Ian Gary's a big favorite. I'm not so sure. If he steamrolls Jeff Neal, we got a fucking prospect on our hands, and this guy's gonna be champ. And then you're talking about lining up him against Leon in fucking England or Ireland, late 2024. Like that's what you're talking about if he wins this fight in impressive fashion. But I don't agree with the 3-1 line for Ian Gary. Um, you got Cody Garbrandt against Mario Batista. That's a bantamweight unranked fight. Cody Garbrandt's a no name, I guess, and they're gonna have some things on the press conference because Song Yadong versus Rob Font got cancelled. And that was a fight that was gonna be on the main card, obviously, and that was a fight that I was really excited for. But then you just got that being cancelled. Rob Font's now fighting Corey Sandhagen. And then you got Cheeto versus Pedro Munoz. Cheeto was gonna fight Henry Cejudo. Um, and then that's it. So and then Weidman versus Tavares headlines the prelims. You got you got the tough fights on there from the Ultimate Fighter. And then you got like Gregory Rodriguez against Dennis Tallulah. But not a heap of massive fights on that UFC 292 card. So it's going to be fun, I'm sure. But it's just something I think they could have done better with. So that's a card that I think is going to end up being like fun, but just not something that's going to be as memorable as like a 291 or a 290, and these recent pay-per-views that have just really delivered. But still a solid card overall. But those are all the categories, all the topics of sorts that I wanted to go over. We're going to move on to the questions now. We've got quite a few of them. So the first question: how do you think Aljo holds up in 145 if he moves up? Really interesting question. Obviously, he's got that fight with O'Malley coming up. He's expressed his desire to move up after that, regardless of a win or a loss. So we'll be seeing him at 145. So I've got the featherweight rankings here. We'll run from 15 through to champ, and we'll say who he beats. I think he beats Caceres, he beats Barboza, beats Ige, beats Bryce Mitchell, beats Sadiq Youssef. Movsar Evloev is tough. I don't want to overrate Movsar, so I'm gonna go with Aljo to start. Giga takes him down. We saw Giga got held down by Kelvin Cater. Beats Zombie, beats Cater, beats Emmett. I think he loses to Poirier. I think Allen is close. I think he would lose. I think he could beat. I think he'd beat Ortega. I think he would lose to Yair, lose to Holloway, and lose to Volk. So that's the first question. A good one to start. Um, Next one. Nearly everyone is booked in the top five bantamweight except for Peter Yan. Maybe a year off would benefit him, or if not, who do you think would be good as a bounce back matchup for Peter Yan? Um, Good question, and it's definitely a relevant one as well. Peter Yan, coming off a bunch of tough losses, lost to Marab, lost to O'Malley, lost to Aljo, twice if you want to count the DQ. Um, Oh, I'm talking as a bounce back matchup. Okay, you've got options. If you want to just be like really easy and just give him someone that he can easily beat, you're looking at like a Adrian Yanez or a Pedro Munoz or a Cheeto Vera, one of those kind of guys. If you're looking at really making, if they want to just keep testing him and make sure he's still there, you're looking at a Song Yadong, a Corey Sandhagen versus Rob Font winner or loser regardless. Maybe an Umar Nurmagomedov. I could see them honestly doing that in Abu Dhabi. You're looking at those kind of names. I would personally just because I want to see Peter Yan get a win. I say you do the winner of Cheeto Vera versus Pedro Munoz against Peter Yan late in the year or early next year. I'd say. Next question: should Chimaev get a title shot if he wins over Costa? A lot of people are saying this, but I don't really think that's how it should play out. Chimaev should get one more, in my opinion. I would tend to agree, and just the way that middleweight is right now, I think timeline wise, he's actually gonna need to get another one anyway because unless they just rush him in, they do Izzy versus Chimaev UFC 300. That could happen. But like let's say because Izzy is, I imagine he's fighting Strickland September. Beats Strickland pretty easily, doesn't take a lot of damage. I think he turns around and fights Drickus December, January, one of those kind of dates around there. Early 24 or late 23. Um, Okay, I think he could personally lose that fight, but let's say he wins. Um, I believe UFC 300 is going to be so 297's Jan, 298's Feb, 299's March. So 29 or 300 is going to be either April or if they do two pay-per-views in March, it'll be March. So that's going to be UFC 300, and I could really see that timeline matching up. But if they end up doing, if Pereira beats Prochazka and he becomes the light heavyweight champ, you already know they're doing Izzy versus Pereira light heavyweight UFC 300. So depending on what kind of plays out with the matchmaking there and who beats who and if Izzy can turn around for whichever dates, I think Chimaev should get another one and I think he should fight um a Robert Whitaker, maybe a Sean Strickland if he loses to Izzy, something like that. Just a top fight of Vittoria, Cannonier, just one of those guys. Um, and then I think he can get the title shot, maybe International Fight Week 2024. A good question. Next one. Who do you think wins at lightweight for Volk versus Poirier, Volk versus Oliveira, and Volk versus Chandler? All right. Volk versus Chandler, dangerous because of the explosiveness and the power, but I do think Chandler's an idiot and would just gas himself out. Volk's smart enough to survive the early onslaught. He would just tap him at range for the first few rounds, and then he would start to pour the pressure on as Chandler gassed late. I think Volk wins the decision. Um, Volk versus Oliveira, very close fight. I do believe that it's a much more difficult fight, or dangerous, I actually would say, than Makachev, just because standing wise, I think it's easier because Oliveira is less defensively sound, but he is, I think, more offensively dangerous on the feet than an Islam Makhachev. But I do think that if Oliveira gets it to the ground, he can win very easily. So I think that's a 50-50 fight in my opinion. But I'll reassess my answer based on how on how Oliveira does against Islam in the rematch. And then Volk against Poirier, just off what we saw against Gaethje just then, I know Volk doesn't have that level of power, but Gaethje was able to land shots on Poirier. Poirier's getting a bit older. Defenses are getting a bit less. I think Volk would outpoint him on the cards. Um, Good question. Moving on, we've got a few ones here. How do you see a potential fight between Aspinall and Pavlovich? I believe Pavlovich would KO him in the first 3 rounds. I think Aspinall is too open on the feet, and he leaves himself open for strikes, and he's not defensively responsible. I think Pavlovich catches him. Um, Number two, who do you think would win in a fight between Prime DJ and Prime Figgy and Prime Moreno? So I think DJ beats both of them. I think he's just too good. Figgy shows like defensive holes, and I think Moreno will just get out grappled. I think we saw what happened with Pantoja. Sorry, not Drickers. Demetrius Johnson is an amazing grappler, and I think he'd do the same. Number three, do you think any former heavyweight champs, UFC or Pride, will beat current John Jones? I think you're looking at a prime Francis, um, maybe even a prime Stipe, potentially a prime DC because this current Jones, right? He's kind of fat. He's not as fast, not as like lethal with the striking, not as explosive with the wrestling. So I think there are a few guys. But overall, I think Jones is just Jones, and he's just too fucking hard to beat. And then number four, which four fighters would you choose? On your team in a potential 5v5 street fight. You are the fifth member of the group. Um, yeah. I think four other fighters in a street fight. Okay. Sergey Pavlovich, Francis Ngannou, Alex Pereira, um, John Jones. I think that's a pretty good list. Maybe Aspinall. You're looking at heavyweights. I know people are going to be like, oh, Volk, Oliveira, fucking Leon Edwards, but like you're looking at the heaviest guys and the guys that hit the hardest. So yeah, those four. Good questions. Do you think Tom Aspinall or Curtis Blades have the best chance to possibly beat John Jones? If not, who do you think has the best chance? Um, I think you're missing a name. I think it's Sergey Pavlovich. I think Tom Aspinall has a very good chance. I think it's Aspinall and Pavlovich. I think Blades is a tard and he just doesn't fight the way he would need to win that fight. But Pavlovich, I think, beats Jones on the feet. I think Jones is just slower, and not as dangerous on the feet at heavyweight, and he avoids the grappling, and I think he can do that, and just be stronger and bigger because Cyril Gane has no takedown defense, and Jones is only getting older, and Pavlovich and Aspinall both coming into their primes, and the same with Aspinall, quicker on the feet, I believe. Um, I don't. What does Jones do though to beat Aspinall is my question. Like, does he outstrike him? I don't think so. Jones doesn't have like really one shot KO power. Um, what else? Like out grapple Pavlov, no, out grapple Aspinall. He's got pretty good takedown defense, and he's a good on his good on the ground with the jits. So I think both of those guys could potentially beat Jones, but again, Jones is Jones. He just finds ways to win shit. Next question: would it harm Jones' legacy, or what harm would happen to Jones' legacy if he ended up losing to Stipe? Obviously, that would cement Stipe as the GOAT of heavyweight. Yep. But would it remove Jones' status as GOAT? Do you ever think he retires if he loses that fight? We have never seen Jones lose before, so I'm very curious what your thoughts on a scene would be like if he loses. Yeah, that would be crazy to see. I'd be extremely surprised to see Stipe beat him. I'd be very happy to see it as well, but I'd be extremely surprised. If he loses, it would be crazy. Like he'd probably get an immediate rematch just because the star power, and they'd build that up. Um, but yeah, if Jones loses, maybe he would retire. Now, I think Jones's ego would not let him leave the sport on a loss. I think he would try and get that back. But if he loses again, maybe this isn't going to happen. But like if he loses twice to Stipe, I don't think it would take away him. Maybe it would take away him as the GOAT. It would definitely make Stipe the heavyweight GOAT. But yeah, I think Jones has still cemented a legacy pretty well, of being a roid abuser. Next question. Who do you think will be the champion in each division this time next year? Let's think. Heavyweight, I think Sergey Pavlovich. Light heavyweight, I believe Alex Pereira will be the champion. Middleweight, I believe Hamzat Chimaev. Welterweight, I think it will be Shavkat Rakhmonov or Leon Edwards, depending on if he fights more. If he fights again after Colby before then, I think he will lose the belt to Shavkat. But if he fights Colby and then he doesn't fight until this deadline, then obviously he'll be the champ. Um, Lightweight, that's tough. Could be Islam, you know. I think it'll be Islam if Volk fights him quick enough, and there's challenges though. That's the thing. But I think what it's gonna be Islam versus Oliveira, Islam versus Gaethje, and then I don't see Islam fighting Volk before that deadline. So I do believe that Islam will be the champion. Featherweight, I think it's Volk as long as he doesn't retire or vacate. Bantamweight, I think it'll be. That's actually really tough. This time next year, I think it'll be Marab. But if Song Yudong fights Marab, I could see him winning that. And flyweight, I think it's going to be Pantoja. I don't see Moreno beating him in a fourth fight or a third fight, whatever you want to say. And I don't think El Bazi Royval. I think Figgy's moved up and he's past his prime anyway. So I think it honestly could be Pantoja. And then women's, I think it'll be um, Bueno Silva at bantamweight, Blanchfield at flyweight, and Zhang Weili at strawweight. Good question. The next one. After Paul Craig's performance against Andre Muniz, how far do you think he can make it at middleweight? And also, how does Topuria stack up against the top five at featherweight? Yeah, got my middleweight top 15 here. Let's go. Paul Craig. I think he beats Muniz in a rematch. I think he would beat Curtis on the ground. I think he would lose to Imavov on the feet. I think he would beat Gastelum. I think he could beat Allen, but ultimately I'd pick Allen. I think he could beat Hermanson, because Delizzi, I think he'd beat Hermanson. Um, I think I could see him beating Delizzi, They do look very similar, so that'd be kind of funny. I think he'd beat Brunson. Brunson's old and shit. And I think he loses to Costa, Strickland, Vittori, Cannonier, Whitaker, Drickus, Izzy. You know what? Vittori is a tard, so I could see him winning that, but I doubt it. So probably yeah. And then Topuria against the top five, featherweight top five. He loses to Volk, loses to Holloway, loses to Yair, beats Ortega, beats Allen. That's the top five. Yeah. Next question. How would changing the 12 to 6 and kick/knees to a grounded opponent rule change the landscape of the UFC? What fighters will be the most affected by these changes? I think it would greatly help people stuffing takedowns. It would help anti-wrestling if you could 12 to 6 elbow people. And then grappling as well, it would make it a lot more dominant and a lot easier to throw ground and pounds from just anywhere. If you could just kick or knee from anywhere, or 12 to 6 elbow. Peter Yan's a fucking 5 division champion. That's what would fucking happen. But yeah, I think that would be an interesting one. I think 12 to 6, like, support. Knees I support, but I don't support kicks because it's too easy to just fucking stand up and just kick. Like, you get too much wind up on it and load up. And so I don't think that would be good. But I do support knees to a grounded opponent. I do support 12 to 6 elbows as long as it's not to the back of the head. Um, Next one, how do you think a rematch with Oliveira and Holloway would go at lightweight 3 and 5 rounds? I think Oliveira wins both. I think he's too good at lightweight. I think Holloway's taken too much damage. Oliveira hits like a truck. I think Holloway at lightweight would just not be the same physical presence or the same like kind of yeah, the same presence or like threat. Um, I think he'd be quick, but I think he would not have. Actually, no, he'd probably still have the cardio, but I just think he's slowing down a little bit, and I think even Oliveira would have a lot of success on the ground and probably sub him, to be honest. Um, Next one. Given Robert Whittaker's success at middleweight, how do you think Wonderboy would have done at middleweight, or would have done at middleweight after his fights with Woodley? Could have done well against Gaslam, Yoel, Whittaker, Bisping, Adesanya, question mark. I'm not going to talk about back then. I didn't watch sport back then. I'm not as familiar with the primes of the fighters. I know that was kind of when he was in his sort of prime area. But I'm not as familiar with how good all these guys were back then. But I'll go right now. Back with middleweight top 15. Um, Batesman is beats Curtis, beats Craig. I think he loses to Imavov, beats Gastelum, beats Allen, beats Hermanson, beats Delidzi, beats Brunson, could be Costa, beats Strickland, beats Vittori, beats Cannonier maybe, loses to Whitaker, loses to Drickus, loses to Izzy. So, geez, Wonderboy, that's assuming he's not just absolutely drowned out by the size, but I think middleweight is shit, so I think he would honestly win a lot of those fights. Um, Next one, which current fighter has the most CTE? Fuck. It's fucking Tony Ferguson. Let's be honest. It's Tony. It's I mean current, so not BJ Penn. It's like those kind of guys, Diaz, all that. But right now, lightweight, Tony Ferguson, current, he's just got ridiculous levels of CTE. Um, Next one. On a scale of 1 to 10, how surprised will you be if Stipe beats Jones? I'll be extremely surprised, probably a 9 or 8. There is a kind of path to do it, but I doubt it happens. But yeah. Next one. Who should Shavkat fight next if he beats Calvin? Bilal, loser of Colby, Leon, Usman, or who? I'd love to see Bilal because I think he would smoke him, and I don't want Bilal to fight for the belt because it would be just pay-per-view poison and be shit to watch. Um, I think loser of Colby Leon, I do think does make sense. Timeline wise, I think that's a good fight to make. Um, Usman as well potentially. I don't think Usman wants to fight him though because they train together, and Usman just is looking for any excuse to avoid that fight. But yeah, I think he fights a top 3 guy if he runs through Calvin. If he has a close war, you're looking at like a Gilbert Burns. But if he runs through him, I think loser of Colby Leon is a good fight. Next one. Will these fighters ever be champion in 2 years from now? Look, okay, well, you've got all fucking Russians here, so you're obviously a Dagestani. Or just a Russian supremacist. We've got Pavlovich heavyweight, I think he will. Ankalaev light heavyweight, I think he could. Ikram slash Hamzat at middleweight, I think Hamzat, yep. Um, Romanov, I assume you're in Rachmanov, because Alexander Romanov is not cutting to welterweight. And then Hamzat at welterweight. Hamzat won't fight at welterweight anymore. I do see Shavkat becoming a champ. Usman Magomedov at lightweight after Bellator being taken over by Usman won't join the UFC, I don't believe. And if so, he wouldn't fight Islam. Um, Movzar at featherweight, no, I think Volk and Topuria and Yair and Holloway all beat him. Umar at bantamweight, yeah, 2 years might be a tight timeline, but if they get him a top 5 opponent pretty soon, then I could see it. And then Makayev at flyweight, no, I stand by saying Makayev is extremely overrated. And he's at least 5 years away from top 5. Next one. How do you think Bo Nickel would fare against Paul Craig? The Scotsman looked like a menace in his last appearance. He did look very good. I do believe Bo Nickel would win. Um, I just think the wrestling and top pressure is too much. Craig doesn't have good takedown defense because he welcomes it on the back. That sounds weird. Pause there. But yeah, he welcomes being on his back. On the feet, I think Bo Nickel's too quick and tears him apart. So I think he'd probably just stay out of danger on the ground. I think he's smart enough to do that. And I think he'd win. Probably by finish, maybe TKO. Next one. If Charles beats Islam, do you think Islam deserves an immediate rematch? Considering he ended 2 of the longest winning streaks, I do not. I think one one title defense is not enough to warrant a an immediate rematch, but it would be 1-1. So I guess you could do it, but I would prefer to see like Gaethje or Volk or something. If Charles beats Islam, fucking run Volk immediately because that's a fight I want to see. And then also if Poirier beats Gaethje and Charles, oh, this was 5 days ago, so this was before. Okay, so forget that. And Charles beats Islam, I think Dustin will go for title. Well, not anymore. Sorry, this was 5 days ago, so a little bit. I missed the memo of the head kick knockout, buddy. The next one. What's your favorite finish in each weight class, TKO or submission? I can't give you all time. It would just be it would be recent of a list and I would just be naming the obvious like well-known finishes. But I go in the last few years or since I've watched UFC. Um, Heavyweight, I'll go with heavyweight. Pavlovich against like Lewis, nah, not Lewis, probably Ty. It was sad to watch, but it was just impressive. Aspinall against Tybura was good. Jones against Gane for sub. But yeah, those kind of ones. This is just recent though. This is extremely Lewis against Volkov, which is fun. Francis Stipe, Francis Overeem. Like I can be casual and just say the obvious ones. Light heavyweight favorite finish. It's Yuri versus Reyes. I'll be completely honest. Or Yuri versus Teixeira for a sub because those were both crazy. Um, Middleweight. Um, favorite. I'll be honest. It was Periera against fucking Izzy because I wanted him to win that fight. Um, but if you're looking like most impressive recent, I guess you could go Dricus against Rob. I wouldn't say favorite because it was kind of sad. But yeah, those kind of ones. Oh, Strickland against fucking Magomedov. That was awesome. Welterweight. Fuck. Hamzat against like Holland was just cool to watch. Knockout wise. Fuck. Who are you looking at knockout wise? Um, Ian Gary against D-Rod was pretty cool. Oh, Leon against Usman. What the fuck am I saying? Leon against Usman. Lightweight, Oliveira against Gaethje was spectacular to watch. Featherweight, Volkanovski against Yair was awesome in terms of just how cool it was to see and how good Volk is. But like Taporia, oh no, Taporia Herbert was at lightweight. Um, yeah, those kind of ones. Bantamweight. I'll go with like fuck Song Yadong against Ricky Simone was pretty cool. I enjoyed watching that. What else are we looking at? Oh well, like Sandhagen flying knee against Edgar, spinning kick against Moraes, those kind of ones. O'Malley's all those cool like walk off KOs from O'Malley. Tai Tuivasa against Derek Lewis. Sorry for heavyweights, take that back. That's actually my favorite there. Um, and then flyweight, I'll probably go with Schnell against Sumo Daji is my favorite finish at flyweight. Next question. If they were to retire today, who had the better career, Volk or Israel? It's Volkanovski by far, in my opinion. Way more dominant, way more impressive, way more entertaining, and better competition as well. That's that. How should Charles fight Islam in the rematch if he wants to win? Charles said that he would change nothing about his fighting style in the rematch. Is he in trouble for thinking this, or was something off in the original fight? Um, I don't think he should change nothing because, despite looking really good against Dariush and me thinking that like if he comes in like that, he's got a really good shot. Um, you do have to look at the loss to the guy. Like you do have to really reflect on that and be like, "Fuck, I did lose. I got to look at this. Don't throw flying knees open like an idiot." Um, but I do think he can still win if maybe that worked for him. Maybe just being a clear head, not thinking about the first result, and then because that's running through your mind if you do think about that. Maybe that's honestly a better path for him, but we'll see. Next one. Do you think Islam, if he beats Charles, has a better chance of challenging Leon at welterweight or defending his belt against Volk? I think he's got a better chance against defending against Volk because I think at welterweight, it's just a size and strength advantage. Like, I don't think he would be the same dominant physical presence at welterweight. Like Leon stuffs takedowns from Usman and shit. Like, and I think he beats Islam on the feet and counters him well and puts him down maybe. Um, but I do believe that I think Volk, while I think he would lose both, I do believe, I think Volk's a little bit easier. Next one. Fighters outside the top five that can defeat the current champ. Okay, let's go. Heavyweight, I don't think he would beat him right now, but the best chance outside the top five would be Almeida. Light heavyweight, I think it would be well, there's no champ, but I think Johnny Walker or Krylov, I believe both of them are outside the top five. Middleweight, um, I think it's Bo Nickel. Or no, it's Hamzat actually. It's Hamzat Chimaev at middleweight. Welterweight, I think it's Shavkat. Lightweight, I think it's Sayukian probably, or if you count Volk, but I guess that's kind of dodgy. Featherweight, I think Tapor is in the top five, so I would have to go with him. But it's Tapor in the top five, so I'd have to go with him. If not, I guess it could be Evloev or like something like that. But I think Volk still beats them. Bantamweight, I believe it would be like a Song Yadong type guy or a who else? Who's outside the top five? Umar Nurmagomedov maybe, something like that. And then flyweight, it's tough. No, Raval and Albazi in the top five, so maybe Kaika or France, I guess. But I don't think anyone at flyweight beats the champ. Um, Next question. What do you think about Tom Aspinall's future as a champion? I really like his humble, nice guy attitude, but appreciate his fighting style. Also, what's your prediction for Cyril against Pavlovich? I definitely see Aspinall becoming a heavyweight champion, but I don't know how long he holds it for. I do, as I said before, think he would lose to Pavlovich. And I think Pavlovich also beats Cyril Gane to answer your question. I think he just closes the distance too well, presses him against the cage, and just lands a big shot. Um, Next one. Do you think the UFC need more weight classes like 165, 175, or 195? I do think that would be helpful, but it would also be a pretty strenuous process, and you'd have to figure out which guys, and just doing vacant title fights would just be a hassle. But I think ultimately, if you're looking at guys who would benefit from that, I think you're looking at like Islam, I think would be better at 165 without draining himself. Colby, I think, would be better at 165, cut an extra 5 pounds because he's not cutting much weight for welterweight. 175 would be guys like Michelle Pereira. Um, I think Hamzat would do well at 175, those kind of guys. 195, I think you're looking at like, um, fuck, who's at one? Who would be at 195? Um, who's stuck in between light heavyweight and welterweight, or light heavyweight and middleweight? Um, I guess it's kind of guy. I think he cuts him off against the cage and just catches him with a big shot. I think if Tai Tuivasa can land clean on you, I'm very confident that Pavlovich can, and I think Gane's chin isn't amazing, so I think he'd get caught by Pavlovich. Um, oh my god, I'm going through a fucking brain fade. Sorry, I just had to pause it there. Back to the other question. So it's 165, 175, or 195. I do think that 195 is tough. I don't think there needs to be a 195, but I do support a 165, 175, 185, and then I think you can do that 20-pound jump. But I guess you could see some people there. But yeah, maybe Pereira, but even then he's good at light heavyweight. Next one, who should Wonderboy fight next? I'll give you names. Della, Jeff Neal, maybe in a rematch. Gilbert Burns, no, actually not Gilbert Burns. Um, who else? Ian Gary. Ian Gary's the guy. Ian Gary or Jeff Della Maddalena. Those are the two that I want to see. Where does Poirier go after the loss? He'll probably take a fucking year layoff again, knowing him. Um, if you're looking at, I want him to fight fiziev or the winner of fiziev Gamrot. Maybe Armin or Dariush, those kind of guys. But knowing him, he's gonna fucking wait till Nate Diaz comes back and fight him. Um, Next one, where does Yarn go now? I think Yarn has to. Um, Yarn probably. Who does Yarn fight? I think Krylov or Rakic in a rematch. I think is who Yarn fights. Next one. How well do you think Israel Adesanya would match up against the top five of welterweight? How do you see him in the top five pound for pound list? Um, and do you see him as top five? Yeah, I do see him as top five in the pound for pound list. I think you kind of have to. But at welterweight, let's just see the rankings here. I think if you're talking about welterweights moving up, I think he beats Chiesa, he beats Della, he beats Gary, beats Holland, beats Magny, beats Luque, beats Brady, beats Neil, beats Wonderboy. I think Shavkat's interesting. I think he could lose that. I think Burns would be too small at middleweight. I think he loses to Chimaev, beats Bilal, could honestly lose to Covington just from pressure. I think he would beat Usman at this stage, and I think he would beat Edwards. Next question. Um, who are the top five BMFs currently in the UFC roster? Also, if you could have it your way, what fight would be the most deserving for the BMF title? Um, let's see. BMF title, well, right now it's Gaethje, but if you're doing like a one per division or another one, I think you do like a. It's kind of tough, you know. I won't give you one for that, but I will say, um, top five BMFs. I'm thinking like Holland, Corey Sandhagen, Justin Gaethje because he's got the belt, Volk, um, and then like who else? Pantoja, in my opinion. Um, Next one. Since T-Ferg won't stop himself, who do you think are the best opponents? I kind of talked about this. This guy saying Chase Hooper, Paddy, Clay Guida, Sergey Pavlovich. Yeah, honestly, let's give him Sergey Pavlovich because that'll fucking then he'll be dead, and then he won't have to fucking keep fighting and go on a 12 fight losing streak. But yeah, honestly, those aren't bad names. Paddy Kimlet could honestly happen. Clay Guida, yeah, I like those. Chase Hooper maybe. Um, Next one. How could Tony's career have been handled better after the Gaethje loss? I think it's not so much that it was handled terribly. I think he shouldn't have rushed back in there against Oliveira. I think that killed his confidence, and I think he was just not in the right mental state going into that fight. So I think that fight should have happened months after it did. I think again, I think don't. I think at some point they should have just been like. I think instead of Chandler, they should have been like outside the rankings. Bam. Bobby Green when he fought Chandler instead. That's what they should have done, and he would have won that. If he fought Bobby Green before he fought Chandler, I think he would have won that fight. But it's just like they kept trying to see if he was still in the rankings. So you should have just gone at some point, just gone bang, no, outside the rankings, get a win first. Instead of just slowly moving them down from fucking 3 to 5 to 7 to 9 to 12, whatever. Like they should have just given him an easy win. It wasn't like it was handled badly though. So yeah. What other fighters besides Volk, Pereira, Jones do you think have a chance of moving up the division and becoming champ? Um, what I had in mind was if Shavkat moved up. I could see Shavkat maybe if it's, but only if it's Izzy and Leon. I think he doesn't beat Colby as easily, and he doesn't beat like a Drickus or a Hamzat. I think Hamzat can't. Hamzat could honestly low-key be double champ at light heavyweight if he bulked up and if he was fighting a striker. Like I think he'd beat Yuri, I believe, or Pereira. Um, but beside that, not really anyone. Yeah, Volk. I don't think Aljo does it. Islam, I guess. Islam going up to welterweight. I think it's select matchup he could win. But yeah, apart from that, no one else really. Um, with Holland's recent win, how do you think he performs against the rest of 170 ranked fighters? Also, do you believe also, can you believe they didn't pay Wonderboy? Guy shows up, makes weight, gets nothing. I know that sucks. They should have paid Wonderboy. They should have given Wonderboy Pereira. So they should have given Wonderboy Pereira's money instead, and given him his money. That's terrible that he didn't get paid. But Holland against the rest of ranked welterweights beats Chiesa, obviously. Loses to Della, loses to Gary, beats Magny, beats Luque, beats Brady, could beat Jeff Neal, you know. Loses to Wonderboy, loses to Shavkat, loses to Burns, Chimaev, Muhammad, Covington, Usman, Edwards. Yeah, but Holland definitely can improve. Please don't go up to fucking middleweight. He's got nothing at middleweight for him. Next question. Who will win between Dustin and Fiziev? This is a really good question, you know. Um, Dustin Poirier and Rafael Fiziev. You know what? I could see, depending on how long Dustin takes off, like if we see that fight like next year, this time next year, I could really see Fiziev winning that, you know. In a 3 rounder especially, 5 rounder, maybe I'd favour Dustin, but Rafael Fiziev was better than Justin Gaethje in the first round, and Fiziev just showed to be sorry, and Gaethje just showed to be pretty close with Poirier in the first, and then KO'd him in the second. I think the explosiveness of Rafael Fiziev um, would give Dustin Poirier a lot of problems. The speed, he's way quicker. I think he would set him up with something like a kick because Fiziev's got some of the best kicks in the weight class, and he's so quick with them as well. Um, so I would see Fiziev winning that fight by probably a TKO in a 3 rounder, especially if we see that fight this time next year. Next question. How do you think Adesanya's, or how do you favor Adesanya's chances with beating Pereira at 205? Do you think the weight cut will be easier for Pereira? Will have a sorry. Do you think the weight cut being easier for Pereira will have a different outcome? This is a good one to finish on. We'll talk about this for a few minutes. Izzy against Pereira at 205 is really intriguing, and that's the fight I want to see. I think Pereira definitely will have a better chin. be more powerful, stronger, less strained, obviously, better cardio in my opinion, all at middleweight. So all at light heavyweight, I think those all favour him. And I think Izzy is just not as physical or not as he will definitely be outsized. Burrow had to give up somewhat of a size advantage to him because he was cutting all that weight. But at light heavyweight, he'll be able to be bigger, a lot bigger than Izzy. And I think I could see him winning that. I think he'll have more power on his shots. I think he'll be able to take an Adesanya shot better. And in that Pavlovich fight, he showed to be cautious when he had him hurt. When he was standing up on the cage like this, he was taking his time with shots. He was landing one shot after another. Um, Instead of just unloading combinations just for the sake of it, and then he got chinned. Um, he took a few good shots from Blachowicz as well, so I do see him potentially beating Israel Adesanya if they fought at light heavyweight. But Adesanya is the fucking main character apparently, and he's got plot armor, so he would probably end up losing. He'd probably end up winning that fight because that's how the fucking sport goes, and we can't get anything we want. But that's all the questions, guys. Thanks for asking all these questions. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Leave some more questions in the comments if you've got any for the next one. And I'll see you in the next video, which will be the Sandhagen versus Rob Font predictions, and then probably a fight announcement video later in the week because Ankalaev versus Walker and Yanez versus Martinez both just got announced recently. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.